Welcome to another episode of the You Know Ball NBA show presented by Playbook Sports. Phil's out. He didn't want to have a flu game today. He has a concussion, so no driving for my boy. We wish you well soon. Phil, if baseball's your thing, we just launched a new podcast called The Dugout, available on our YouTube. I feel like all you guys have seen it because we've been putting up numbers on The Dugout, man. I want to give a special shout-out to Cooler Than You, Joe, who is running the podcast, who's prepping for the podcast every week. He's a good host, so if you're into baseball and you want something different because the presentation, the way he talks, is really different than stuff you'd see from other baseball podcasts, make sure you check that out at The Dugout on the Playbook Sports YouTube channel. Today, I only got a few subjects. Hopefully this is going to be a quick episode. We'll be talking about the play-in. I'll be talking a lot about the Clippers. I also got some teams and players that have a lot to prove. And then some of my takeaways from this March Madness and this championship game. So if any of that interests you, make sure you guys stick around. Leave a like, leave a sub. You already know. Let's start, man. Phil's not here, so I got to praise the Lakers a little bit. I'm going to give you guys kind of a breakdown of what I saw from the Lakers versus Warriors game and what you could expect in the play-in, because it's pretty much locked in now that the Lakers are going to end up playing the Warriors in the first kind of 9-10 series of the play-in. For starters, Phil has been right to an extent about people turning up against the Lakers. We've seen big game after big game after big game against the Lakers. We just saw Draymond Green shoot 5 for 5 against them from 3 in the first half. And I don't expect this from Draymond in the play-in. I'm just going to put that out there now. But if you're going to say they have big games against the Lakers, I feel like that should raise some questions about the Lakers defense. You could complain about players performing all you want, but if you're not doing anything to stop it, then what really can be said other than that this is a bad defense, And I'm not saying that Draymond shooting 5 for 5 means that you have a bad defense. Draymond does this. Those aren't direct correlations. But Draymond shooting 5 for 5 was a part of how bad the Lakers defense has been over the last 2-3 months. The Lakers have shown to have an elite defense to start the year. They've kind of pivoted. We really haven't seen nothing like this from an elite defense, bad offense, to elite offense, bad defense now. So it is interesting. I don't know if the Lakers can still be that. I think that's my question for you guys. Do you guys still think the Lakers could come out and have an elite defense? You have personnel like Anthony Davis, like Jared Vanderbilt, who is the most questionable player in NBA history. Now, it seems like he will almost come back. He's done it multiple times this year. And I do think the Lakers kind of need them if they want to make that legendary playoff run that people have been talking about. A lot of people are like, oh, the Lakers could beat the Thunder, beat the Timberwolves. I personally don't see that happening. But for them to do that, they need to be fully healthy. They need to be all locked in. And we've seen games where they've kind of disappeared. And I don't really think that would happen in the playoffs. But I do think they need a Jared Vanderbilt performance for them to be good. Let's kind of transition into the Warriors a little bit. I think from what I've seen from the Warriors, if the Lakers and the Warriors were to play today in the play-in, I think the Lakers would win. The Warriors do have 2 wins on the Lakers. Kind of big wins. A lot, talked about wins. I'm not sure what their season series is, but I still think the Lakers would win this play-in game. Every time I've kind of seen the Warriors play this season, they seem kind of fake good. If Steph Curry isn't going out balling, Klay Thompson has had a lot of really good first halves this season, and he kind of just chills out the rest of the game. I just feel like they're fake good. I feel like in a playoff series, teams could figure them out. In a play-in game, I think the talent rises to the top, and I think LeBron and AD are a lot more than what just a Stephen Curry team could handle. Again, though, I'm not saying the Lakers are a lock to win this game. I'd probably give this a plus 200 for the Warriors, minus 200 for the Lakers. So the Lakers would be the favorite for me, but I wouldn't say it's a lock because all you need is one Stephen Curry game, one Draymond Green shooting 5 for 5 from the half, And this is a different story. You could have a LeBron go quiet game or Anthony Davis go quiet game, which we've seen a lot more this year than before. I think the difference between Anthony Davis this year, though, and other years is he doesn't go quiet on the defensive end. He's always kind of giving it his all, which we've kind of seen him we know what Anthony Davis can be at his best, and sometimes he just doesn't put in the effort. But this season, I feel like Anthony Davis has given it his all, despite having his eye poked out 5 or 6 times. I heard an interesting hot take from my cousin, actually. Shout out Ethan. If the Lakers had Caruso and Josh Hart, they would be the 1 seed. Now, me personally, I wouldn't go as high as saying that they'd end up being a 1 seed. Quite frankly, I don't think this team has the role players to be that good. But I think adding a Caruso, adding a Hart answers the questions that they have right now about their defense. Josh Hart is the hustle player in the NBA. There's no one really close to Josh Hart right now when it comes to putting in the effort and hustling. And if there was someone to kind of contest that, it would be Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso is another elite hustle player. And with this stretch that they're in right now where their offense looks so good and their defense looks bad, adding Caruso and Hart, who are plug-and-play offensive players because they don't really need the ball much and they can knock down shots when they're open, but are elite? Am I about to call them elite defenders? Caruso is definitely an elite defender. I don't know if Josh Hart is, but Josh Hart definitely is a contributor to the glass, which we've seen all year that Anthony Davis can't do it on his own, and the Lakers have struggled with that. That's why LeBron gets these 10, 9, 8 rebound games because he really shouldn't be doing that at his age right now. I wouldn't go far as to say they'd be a 1 seed, but maybe a 3 seed, 4 seed, 2 seed in that range. They wouldn't be better than the Thunder, though. Let's transition to a different subject. We've got 2 teams, 2 players who have the most to prove in the playoffs. For starters, my first team I want to talk about is the Milwaukee Bucks. I do think they have a lot to prove this year in the playoffs. There's a sneaky old team. I called Chris Middleton one of the most overrated players in the league a couple weeks ago, and I do think a lot of it is because they don't really have that young spark. Middleton is old. He's not healthy. He's not performing the same way he usually does. I would probably say the same thing about Brook Lopez. Damian Lillard obviously hasn't had a good year. Damian Lillard is not having the same year that he's had in previous years, obviously. And there's just a lot of kind of questions about them, like what they could do in the offseason. You see what happens when they get rid of Drew Holiday. The Celtics today signed Drew Holiday to a 4-year, $135 million deal. It just shows you what Drew's value kind of is. If I'm the Bucks owner, GM, there's 2 directions you could go in this offseason, do you go with going older or going younger? I don't think you could do an in-between where you add young role players and get another old star. I think you have to make a decision on what direction you want this team to go. Give Giannis a direction for what he's going to be playing with his next 4 or 5 seasons. So these are kind of some of the older players they could try to add. Go out and add a veteran. Obviously, the first one I'm going to talk about is Paul George. Paul George is 30 right now. And Paul George and Dame, I feel like would be a nasty little combo. They would definitely have to make some moves, which could end up hurting them. And you saw with this Drew Holiday stuff that moving Drew Holiday definitely affected how they played. But you add a Paul George, a Damian Lillard, you probably have to give up a Brook Lopez. You probably have to lose a Bobby Portis too. But now you have a big 3 that's arguably the best big 3 we've seen ever. With Damian Lillard still being able to contribute. He's not Portland Dame, but being able to contribute at a level where it's like he could still get you 50 in a night. And then Paul George is one of the most efficient second options in basketball. Paul George could go out there and just give you 22, 23, shooting 50, 55% from the field. I know that's not what he's averaging, but he's consistent, and you kind of know what you're getting from him, except in the playoffs. In the playoffs, he'll disappear, but you could talk yourself into this team being a elite team in the playoffs with Paul George, Dame, and Giannis. You would be a casual basketball fan not to do that. The next player I want to talk about is Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris turns 32 this year, And Tobias Harris is a great role player that you could have, and I don't feel like you have to give up as much as when you want to land a Paul George. But if you land Tobias Harris there, now you got a player that could kind of plug and play. You could play him at the 3. You could play him at the 4 and slide Giannis down to the 5. Tobias Harris could stand in your corners like a shooting guard almost. and just kind of get it done that way. That's all you really need from him. Even though he does pump fake open threes and does bullshit like that, you kind of know what you're getting from him. And with how big his last contract was, if Tobias Harris really wanted to, he could be like, all right, I'm going to take a pay cut and go play with Giannis, and hopefully that raises my stock a little bit. The last player I want to talk about, and this one is the most interesting to me, I think Klay Thompson on this Bucks team would be sneaky good. Even though Klay Thompson is the oldest of the pack, turning 34, Klay Thompson is a sneaky perfect fit for Giannis, you know. You just need a player to stand in the corner. Who does that better than Klay Thompson, you know? And Klay Thompson in the corner, with Dame obviously with the ball, he knows how to play with a player like that, obviously playing with Stephen Curry over his career. Now you got Giannis down there who has all the space in the world. You can't really double Giannis when you have Dame and Klay on the perimeter. Even this version of Klay, who's not the most efficient shooter, you can't really give that up. Now, if Milwaukee in the next season wants to get a little bit younger, they could go out there and look for a Malik Monk who raised his stock this season, you know. Malik Monk has shown that he is an elite six-man, probably the favorite to win six-man of the year. He is a perfect fit for Giannis. You just have a dude that could go out there and get buckets. You relieve Damian Lillard a little bit. Chris Middleton could be ass like he's been all year. You give him the space to do that while also adding like a player who he isn't a good defender by any means, but he could give you what you need. He'll buy in and be aggressive and do what you ask of him. And, you know, with Doc Rivers there, you kind of need players who are just aggressive. Doc Rivers isn't going to really force the best defensively out of players. So adding a Malik Monk there would be nice. The next player I want to talk about is Nick Claxton, who's probably the best young player in this free agency market. You know, he's really young. Like Malik Monk, I think Malik Monk is probably 27, 28 at this point. Claxton's probably 25. Having a player that you could start at the 5 and you could bring Brook Lopez off your bench, I think Claxton adds to this defense, and now you got two elite defensive bigs, and we kind of have seen what that has done in Cleveland, especially last year. And when they went on that run this year, a lot of that Cleveland run was because of how elite defensively Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen really are. Now you got Giannis and Claxton? Stop. Giannis and Claxton, stop playing with them. I think the only problem with that really would be that Brook Lopez's three-point shooting is so elite, and Claxton can't really do that. Now you don't have the spacing on offense as you did when you had Brook Lopez there. But Giannis and Claxton, again, would be an elite defensive duo. He's a great screen and roller for Damian Lillard because we know that's not Giannis's game. That's what Giannis is saying. He don't want to set the screens. Well, Nick Claxton's one of the best in the league at doing that. The last player that the Bucks should try to land if they want to get younger, and in case it hasn't been clear by my energy, I think the Bucks definitely should go out and get younger. You know, with this, the oldness of this roster, the kind of like everyone is kind of, they've kind of played in the league enough, you know, like you want these players who kind of want it more. You got to have these young players around you to push your older players. Like, oh shit, Malik Monk's going hard at practice. I'm Damian fucking Lillard. Why am I not going hard at practice, you know? So adding a Sadiq Bey, I think would be a great pickup for this team. You want a dude who could stand in the corner. Former 50 ball. Everyone's talking about this Malachi Flynn 50 ball. Were you here when Sadiq Bey scored 50 against, I want to say, the Magic? A 50 bomber? Don't play with Bey. You know, I don't think I was about to say something wild. I was going to say I don't think Giannis has ever played with a player that scored 50. Like, you don't got Damian fucking Lillard on his team. But Sadiq Bey is a sneaky corner shooter. And he is a restricted free agent, but I don't think the Hawks are going to go in that direction anymore. I think the Hawks are going to blow it up. I could just see Trae Young as a Spur. I could see them moving DeJounte, too. Everyone's like, pick one. Who are they going to go with? Trade both of them away and restart, you know? You could build a core around Jalen Johnson and find one of these young guards in the draft that you could really play together with the two. They do have a tough decision to make, but they gotta make the decision. You can't be a tweener team. The next team I want to talk about that has a lot to prove in the playoffs is actually a team that we kind of touched on for a second, and that's the Clippers. What makes this team the elite team that kind of gets surrounded by them, other than their occasional playoff regular season runs that they go on where they look like the best team in the league for 20 games? I feel like they've done that every year that they've had Kawhi and PG. And we haven't really seen that turn into any playoff success at all. Like, what does that really mean that you have these type of runs? You know, they have a big decision to make in the offseason, between picking Paul George or James Harden. If I'm them, I think I'm picking James. I know that might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think I'm picking James if I got to pick between James and Paul George, just because James Harden is James. Nah, I'm not even going to do that. That's some bullshit. I'm going to give you guys a real answer. Paul George hasn't really shown that he could be successful in the playoffs other than the 2021 season where they went on their little run. But other than that, Paul George and OKC wasn't that good. Paul George and the Pacers was a different dog, but that was 10 years ago. Paul George on the Clippers every other year. We've seen pandemic, playoff, P, disappear. He should be disappear, because he just fades away when it comes playoff time. And we don't really want to see that. With James Harden, on the other hand, you could have James Harden, Kawhi. Westbrook's not going to cost a lot to keep. So you got those three. And what happens when you kind of open up a forward spot in the NBA is now you could just fill it with a role player. We kind of saw a good example of this in Phoenix this last season, where you add Grayson Allen from losing Chris Paul. And I know Chris Paul's not a wing, but Grayson Allen is. You add that wing kind of presence, and now you got a dude who could just knock down shots. He doesn't need the ball. He don't need all that. You just have a dude that stands in the corner and shoots. And kind of like players I listed earlier, Klay Thompson's a free agent. Sadiq Bey's a free agent. Emmanuel Quickley, I think, is a restricted free agent. But you have these dudes that could kind of just chill in the corner, knock down shots, compared to like Paul George, who needs the ball. But now you can run your offense through Harden and Kawhi. And a lot of people want to shit on Harden's numbers this year. A lot of that is because he's kind of playing third fiddle to Kawhi, to Paul George, and letting them ball out. Even to Norman Powell sometimes when Norman Powell's in the game. That's why Norm has been looking so good this season. Another thing about James Harden as well is James Harden is a lot cheaper than Paul George. You don't have to spend as much to get James Harden in the free agency landscape. I know James Harden wants the Supermax deal, but you don't really have to pay him that. You could kind of pay him whatever the market's kind of telling you. Paul George's market's always going to be 30, 35 mil. Harden, you could kind of see a decline. And honestly, I think if it's Harden and Kawhi, I think his value could go right back up after 2 seasons. Harden could sign a 1-year deal and just say fuck it. But I don't want to count this team out yet. I know we haven't, again, seen a healthy team get playoff success for the Clippers. But at the same time, they're going to have to play the Mavericks in the first round, most likely. And the Mavericks versus the Clippers, Mavericks want to kill those MFs every time they play them. So they got to lock in, and they got to make sure they execute. A lot of people are talking about this series, what are the Clippers going to do when the Mavericks beat them? What are the Mavericks what are the Mavericks' expectations after they beat the Clippers? And that isn't fair. I don't think that's fair at all, because I think the Clippers have shown us, again, it don't really mean shit, like I said, but they've shown us that they could have a 20-game stretch where they're the best team in the league, and that's all you really need in the playoffs. You go on a 20-game stretch and look like the best team in the league, then you're in the finals. You got to lock in. I think that if the Clippers beat the Mavericks, it would mean a lot more for the Clippers than it would for the Mavericks. If the Clippers beat the Mavericks, I'm looking at the Clippers like, fuck, I do not want to play them as a Thunder fan. I look at the Mavericks and I'm like, okay, the Mavericks handled business. I look at the Clippers, I'm like, this team is looking like that team that we saw games 35 through 55 in the season where they just looked unstoppable. This is the Clippers story, not the Mavericks. If the Clippers win, they could kind of chill out. They don't have to make an immediate free agent decision right away. We don't have to get the rumor mills going. They want that time to kind of make that decision. But if they lose, then if you're a Clippers GM, owner, you got to address the media and say, this is what we got to do in the offseason to get better. But if you could beat the Mavericks and lose to another team, you handled business in the first round. You did what you kind of had to do. I know their expectation is championship or bust, but you handled what you had to do in the first round if you could beat the Mavericks. The Clippers, I feel like, have more reasonings to want it more, Everyone talks about this Clippers curse, and it's annoying to talk about. So imagine if you were a Clipper, how annoying it would be to talk about. I feel like Russ and James Harden have a lot to prove, and they need to win a ring. Your careers are coming to the end, guys. As a Russ fan, as the Russ fan, your career's coming to the end, Brody. And, you're my dog. You got me into basketball, but you're about to wrap it up. I need to see you win a ring, bro. You're going to let me down if you don't win that ring. And I know you're going to let yourself down because Westbrook has shown that he holds himself to a different level of greatness. We've seen it in a 30-10-10 season, which kind of makes me – this is a little off track, but with what Jokic and Luka are doing this year, Ain't it crazy that Westbrook is still the only player to ever average a triple-double and he did it 3 fucking times in a row? You got Jokic, who's looked at as this elite playmaker, and he is. Don't get me wrong, he's the best playmaker in basketball. Probably the best playmaker I've ever watched while watching basketball. And you look at Luka, who's a dude who touches the ball 70% of the game, and they're not averaging triple. That's a conversation for a different time. Let's go into the 2 players that have a lot to prove. My 2 players that have a lot to prove, I got Shea. You know, I feel like there's a lot of, I'm not going to say questions about Shea, but there's a lot of like, are the Thunder legit? Are they a year away? Are they going to be able to compete with a KD, with a LeBron, with a Luka, with a, who's the AC right now? With like a Kings team that's kind of red hot. I just feel like as a Thunder fan, I want Shea to shut everyone the fuck up. I don't want to hear this LeBron shit anymore when it comes to Shea. I don't want to hear, Shea is a top 5 player in the league, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry. But Shea averaged 31 this year. All he does is put up 31, 31, 31. His sleep schedule is consistent. That's what he does. Some players in the league are not consistent. We just saw a Shea 40-piece 2 nights ago. So I know a lot of players have 40 pieces, but from what I'm saying is a team that obviously has talent, is well coached, but for their level of talent, Shea being their leader and having them in this 1 to 3 seed conversation, it's kind of hard to argue with him as a top 5 player because he really has put on a show this year. And then my other player is Embiid, and I feel like I could still argue Embiid gets a pass this year because obviously his injury this year and all that. But at the same time, bro, like, you got to get out the first round. They haven't done that since Ben Simmons and Doc were there, and that's just ridiculous to me because you are Joel fucking Embiid. To me, healthy Joel Embiid is the best player in the league by a lot, I want to say. When I think of the best player in the league, I think of dominance. And when I think of dominance in the NBA right now today, I think of Joel Embiid. You know, there's not many players that do it the way he does it and straight just punk dudes. So I think he's the best player in the league. I shout him out, but I need you to get out the first round, bro. I need it. And again, I could give him a pass this year, but if he could make it out the first round this year, then we don't have to have questions about it next year. If he don't make it out the first round this year, and we see the Sixers kind of struggling a little bit next year, especially if they lose Maxey or Tobias Harris, we got to start having questions about Embiid's playoff success. And if the Sixers look like that again next year, then I don't think I could have Embiid in that best player in the league talk anymore. Me personally, I know that might not matter to Joel, but you know I'm a fan of basketball, and the fans' opinion should matter a little bit. Last thing I want to talk about is this UConn versus Purdue national championship and kind of some of the discussions that are going around about this upcoming draft class. Now, let me just talk about the game straight up, and then we could kind of talk about that. But UConn put on a defensive masterclass. We saw Edey put up 40-20 games, and they kind of made him look like Boban for a little bit. For the end of the first half to the beginning of the second half, Edey was not really on shit. And that's a lot that has to do with Klingen? I didn't even write his first name down. This is ridiculous. Donovan Klingen. And they also had a power forward that was switching on him. But this double team that UConn was putting on with Klingen, who is just, I know he had 4 fouls, but he's a really smart defender. He wasn't really reaching too much. He wasn't putting his hands down. He was just playing his game. And it's hard to guard a dude like this when the dude's hook shot goes 2 arms over your arm. So it's just really smart what we saw from the UConn defense. I really think, like, I counted them out this year for sure after they lost Jordan Hawkins. But Stephon Castle and Donovan Klingen, that is a duo to remember. Like, you think about these, like, fun March Madness runs, and you think about, like, Buddy Hield. You think about, like, Trae Young. You think about, who had another good one? Like, Duke, when they lost to Taco Fall, or when they played Taco Fall, like, that was a fun run. Duke, Zion, Taco Fall. You think of runs like that. Even older, I want to say his name was Angel Hernandez from Miami. Just stuff like that. It's so fun. UConn had a legendary run, probably the best run we've ever seen in a tournament, but it wasn't a fun run. UConn was whooping everyone's ass behind their elite team. Even Tristan Newton had a great game against Stephon Castle. They just had dudes, bro. And I think the question coming out of this is, who would you rather have, Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan on an NBA roster? And I think I would have to go with Zach Edey. I think Edey has a lot of upside. If you asked me this question last year, if you said Zach Edey or this random ass center, I'd probably say the other dude, because Zach Edey seemed like just a college player, like a Cody Zeller, like a Tyler Hansbrough. But Zach Edey, 40-20, bro, that is impressive. That is hard to do on any level of basketball. Hard to do in high school, and he's doing this shit in college. In the tournament where teams are game planning to stop Zach Edey, and Zach Edey said, fuck that shit, I'm going to eat. So I think Zach Edey definitely has a higher ceiling. I also think he has a lower floor, though. I think Donovan Clingan, he kind of has we know what he is. I feel like he's just going to come to NBA, be a smart system defender, plug and play wherever. I could see him in a Boston kind of defense working really well. But Zach Edey, on the other hand, I think if you put him on a team where it's like you got a defined point guard, now we need a center. If the Trailblazers didn't have DeAndre Ayton right now, I'd say Zach Edey should be the guy there. But I think Edey's definitely worked himself into lottery conversations. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I've worked on my mock draft fully yet. I don't think it's the time for that yet. Let me get through the playoffs first. But from what I've seen, I think we could definitely argue that Zach Edey is a lottery talent. And that kind of gets into the next subject I wanted to talk about, where everyone's saying that this draft class is weak, and I don't see it. Zach Edey, I know he's any other draft probably would be a little bit higher, but when you look at last year's draft, you take out like Wembanyama's name, and this draft class is, I'm not gonna say bums, but I'm saying like a really similar class to what we see this year. When you look at like Brandon Miller being the second best player in the class, and then Jaime Jaquez being the third best player in the class. It is just interesting to me, because I think players like Rob Dillingham, like Jared McCain, like Edey, Alexander Sarr, like these are dudes who could all go out there and contribute. Now, they might not be stars in the NBA, and I think when you look at a draft class and you say it's a shitty draft class, I think this draft class is shitty when it comes to finding the next Jokic, Curry, Giannis, LeBron. But at the same time, I don't think it's shitty in the aspect of like, I could see 20 to 25 of these players really contributing on good teams. Whether that's just knocking down shots in the corner, rebounding, playing hard. Alexander Sarr, I think, is a different story. I did do my tape work on him, and I think he is going to be a monster. He handles like a guard and plays defense like a Jaren Jackson Jr. type of player. That's where everyone's comparing him to. But I was really impressed with his ball handling and stuff like that. But that's a little off topic. When I look at a lot of these other players, like I could see Rob Dillingham kind of turning into a Malik Monk. I could see Jared McCain kind of turning into like a Grayson Allen type of player. Like, you need players like that to compete. Not every player is going to be Giannis, LeBron. Again, you need these players to kind of compete. You see the Lakers, like Austin Reeves. That was a late pick. I think that there's a lot of players that could come into the league and do what Austin Reeves is doing in this draft. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to knock Austin Reeves or anything like that, but I think that people are knocking this draft, and it's getting kind of ridiculous and unfair. But that's all I had for you guys today on the Ball NBA show. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, follow, as Phil would say, as Will would say, run the play. Good.